What are
I
some
can see
common
that.
mistakes people make when training for recall, and how can they avoid those?
Common mistakes. One of the common ones that I see a lot is people assume dogs know it. You know, I've had so many people that I've talked to, whether they were prospect clients or they were people that became clients. One of the things that they struggle with is they would tell me, I keep calling him, but he's not coming back. Well, most of the time, the dogs don't fully understand what that is. It takes repetition to teach something. It takes repetition for the dog to learn something. Just like if you were to learn a skill, it would take you hours, several hours to become proficient. And
Exactly.
it can take you, I think someone said somewhere, it takes about 10,000 hours. You probably heard about this. It takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at something if you do it for 10,000 hours, right? So with dogs, we don't have hours necessarily for behaviors like this. We have repetitions. So it takes hundreds and hundreds of repetitions for them to gain some level of proficiency in a behavior. So if you think about the average dog, how often do they get to do recalls? Not very often. And the times that they get to do recalls, they're usually not very effective. It's usually the owner chasing the dog or something like that. So one of the biggest mistakes I would say is assuming the dog knows the recall, or assuming that just because they're, yelling the dog's names, which half of these dogs don't even know their names, as I'm sure
They
you.
just know the voice.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, if I named my dog Fido and I just rescued him, he might not know what Fido means. It might just be a word. So that's one of the most common mistakes that I see is assuming the dog knows it in any fashion when most of the time they don't. How do we avoid it? Well, taking the time to actually do these repetitions, assuming the dog doesn't know it, erring on the side of caution, and being more proactive about the situations that you put your dog in. So, again, assuming your dog maybe is not 100% proficient in a recall cue, what we can do is we can be specific and particular about the situations we put them in. I'm not going to have them off leash in my front yard when there is traffic, people,
Absolutely.
dogs, because now I can think maybe there's a possibility that he doesn't understand what the recall is.
Well, kind of going into not understanding, how can an owner create a strong and reliable recall command? How can they teach that? Because I know you've talked in the past how you use kibble.
Yeah,
I mean, I was like, God, these dogs got to be getting fat all the
yeah,
time, and you're like, no, it's just they earn their food.
yeah,
How do you do something with the kibble teaching the recall?
yeah, and it varies from dog to dog, honestly. I know something we talked about before is we have young dogs, we have older dogs, so the approach will vary a little bit from the young dog to the old dog. When I say old, I don't mean 10 years old. I mean, three and above, right? Three and above, you have an adult, full set adult.
Okay.
You have a dog that is under a year old, you have a very young dog, a puppy, right? Anything in between those two, you have a young dog. So if I have a young, very young dog, very, very young dog, not a young adult, but a young dog, I can look at this dog and go, this dog doesn't have a whole lot of life experience. Maybe he hasn't gone off and chased cars and hasn't gone off and walked around the neighborhood, hasn't gone chase deer. So the less life experience the dog has, the easier it is to train, because it doesn't mean that the other dogs are not trainable. It's just easier when you have a dog that has less experience, because there's a little bit more naivete in there. They don't know how exciting it is to just chase and leave you behind, and then be chased and then chase after the deer and the cat and all. They have not experienced that yet. Whereas an older dog probably has. So now you're battling that experience and you're trying to tell them, look, the kibble that I have is so exciting. The older dog is going to go, no, chasing the deer is more exciting. The younger dog a little bit more naive will go, oh, wow, that is exciting. I can eat out of your hands. So there's a little bit more naivete there, which means it's a little bit easier to teach that dog. Also, another thing that comes into, that's a huge factor, is the temperament of the dog. Some dogs are more dependent. Some dogs want to be with you already. Some dogs, and you guys have probably experienced this, fostering different dogs and owning different dogs throughout your lives, you probably noticed. Some dogs want to spend a little bit more time with you. Some dogs are more independent. So the more independent dogs are a little bit more difficult to train, because whether it be their temperament or whether it be a genetic trait, they are more inclined to be away from you. You know what I mean? So that's those are the factors to consider.
What about giving them like a special treat instead of just kibble? What about like boiled chicken or something that's extra special for that command? Does that work?
Absolutely, yeah. Anything special that you can use to let the dog know, look, coming back to me is really fun, really great. It's never a bad idea. The thing is, this is where sometimes people, even trainers, will go into a bit of a disagreement. You know, we talked about this in a previous episode or previous interview when we talked about disseminating information that you get on the internet, right? So
you're saying some of the information on the internet is not reliable?
not 100%. So like some people will tell you, oh, you know, you shouldn't use treats or food, because if you use treats or food, what's going to happen is the dog is only doing it for the food. It's a very valid point, but it's very polarizing. It's not entirely true. And some people will tell you, myself included, you should use whatever you have at your disposal to let the dog know, look how great it is to come to me. What you don't want to do with the food is, you don't want to necessarily, in the beginning, you can bait them a little bit. You have a very young dog, or this is kind of a new experience for them to learn the recall, you can bait them a little bit and you can let them know, look, it is actually fun to come to me. Good things happen and you get all this wonderful food, right? You get your kibble, but you also get some chicken. In the beginning, it's great to teach them the mechanics. Then after that, we don't want to bait them too much the entire time, because what you run into is, and a lot of people run into this, is the dog will only do it if you have the chicken. They won't do it if you don't have the chicken. So this is where food can become a little bit of a crutch in your training. So in the beginning, yes. A little bit later, you want to be careful about
So
it.
that kind of goes into the next question. So the food, kind of in the beginning, is a positive reinforcement.
Correct,
Going in,
absolutely.
but you make a very valid point about it being, it can become a crutch going down
Absolutely.
as the dog matures.
Well, I
Yeah.
could see it being bad if you go to the park or something and the dog gets off the leash on accident and you don't have boiled chicken or kibble, and then
Yeah,
and then
ultimately,
you're trying to get your dog back.
absolutely. Ultimately, you want to make sure that the dog understands. In the beginning, you want to let the dog know it's great to come back to me. You love to come back to me. It's wonderful. But then as the training progresses, you want to let the dog know now it's a must. You know what I mean?
Yes,
It's great.
that is the objective.
I'm going to show you, but then later it's a must. We're not asking, it's a must. And that progression in itself is a training process.
And my son was telling, you were talking about a young dog under 3 is easier to train, and whereas you got the adult 3 to 4 years and older, you got you're considered. I mean, the dog is kind of set in his ways.
Yeah,
My
yeah.
dog, when I got Ollie, he was 4, and let me tell you something, he was setting his ways on. Like, I like going on little journeys, little walks, and that's
Yeah.
how he became a rescue dog.
Yeah, exactly.
But my son was telling me that in rifle school, in the Marine Corps, there they had it where everybody who's the big hunters come in, they almost, you guys go over here. All the beginners, you come over here. The beginners were trained much faster because they had
No bad habits.
No bad habits.
Yeah.
They learned exactly how the Marine Corps wanted them to shoot their rifle.
Yeah, I can see that.
Day after day after day after
Oh
day.
yeah, I
So
see that.
yeah, he
Yeah.
did that for 2 months. So he said, yeah, you came out of that very proficient and very quickly.
Nice. Makes sense.
But I can see with your point of coming in, it's like the dog's gonna say, hey, deer, I want to go chase the deer. I want to go run.
Yeah, it takes a bit of extra time. Like when I train dogs, when I have clients that bring me their dogs, and one of the things that they want me to train is recall, I can see a big difference. It's very, very obvious. The dogs that have ran away from the owners before, it takes me a little bit longer to train them to come back.
So this brings up a question here. I guess you get a dog, whether it's you've got a puppy that you've been given, that you've gotten, or you've rescued a dog that's 3 or 4 years old. Is it, I guess, important at the very beginning to establish the recall, the sit? You should not wait 2 or 3 months before you start going in to try to train for this?
No, the sooner that you can start, the better. That's the best policy. The training wise, right? That's what you're asking, right?
Right. Well, because I'm thinking here. So, let's say you rescued a dog. The dog's 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, and the dog's environment's already new. It's, might not even know its name.
Yeah.
And you're going through this whole new establishment of this is what I'm going to call you.
Right.
I need to get some general training going on. It should start pretty much at the beginning, or should you let the dog kind of get settled in at home and get going? Or
no, that's another sometimes topic of debate in some circles. And
we won't debate it. We just want your expertise.
Yeah, no worries. But I'll give you both sides of the table. That way, at least it makes sense. So some people believe that you should wait a little bit, get acclimated with the dog, let the dog get a little bit comfortable, and only train when the dog fully trusts you. And that sounds great, because some dogs will only take them like 3 days to get to that point. Some dogs will take several weeks before they are fully accepting and fully comfortable and fully at home. Some dogs will literally take several weeks. And in some cases, will even take over a month. Well, that's a lot of time that I could have worked with the dog. That's a lot of time that I could have built that bond with the dog through training. Here's the thing. The way I look at this is this way. We've all had this experience when we're little, and if you have children, you've experienced it twice. When you send your child to an extracurricular activity, or you go to an extracurricular activity like, martial arts, baseball, whatever, right? Some sort of camp. The child does not need to become best friends with the coach before the coach starts instructing them how to do things. You know what I mean?
That makes sense.
The coach will start telling him what to do immediately. Day one, they'll tell you, I need you to stand here, go over there. I need you to hold the ball this way. I need you to toss it. I need you to toss it to this person. So right away, the child is getting instruction without even feeling 100% comfortable with this person. And then what happens is, as the working relationship develops, then a bond develops as well. So with dogs, I find it the same way. So if you get a dog that you are fostering, or you get a dog that you just adopted, you do not need to wait for this dog to love you for you to start training. You can start right away. Give it like a day or two. Give it a day or two for it to kind of get its bearings in a new environment. But after that, my suggestion is just get going with the training. Do something.
One that we found, Regina and I found, that when we get a foster dog or a cat come in, and we'll just talk about a dog at the moment, we've got to go through an immediate evaluation of the health.
Yeah.
Does it look like it's got a bad case of worms? Does it look like it's, you've got a handful of things that you evaluate that is, this should be this way, this should be this way, and so on. And then, get the vet, check it out, get everything going. And then, at that point, while we're doing that, you're trying to build a bond, but it makes it a lot easier for us. Get the dog checked out, make sure that we're dealing with healthy animal, and then go about and learning what we have. Learning what it's been taught, think we hoped it had been taught.
Yeah, yeah.
But we've also found as we've had some of the animals come in, it's easy to pick up. Spud was one of them. A dog that has never really had a loving home. Because they will, or at least in our scenario we've come across, they will bond with you they want to bond with you.
Yeah. Some dogs for sure, absolutely.
So going back to the recall training here, what role consistency has to play something in this? But so, what role does consistency play in teaching the dog to come when called?
Consistency and really in life in general, we can get really deep into that topic of consistency, but more specifically to training, it's the one thing that will make or break your training. Even if the dog is perfectly trained, when I hand the dog over to a person and I've trained their dog for a month or however long, I just have to tell them, make sure that whenever you say something that he understands, you have to make sure that it gets done every single time. So in training, specifically to the recall, I'll give you one example of when the recall will just not do well with lack of consistency. If sometimes you go, hey, good things happen when you come, and sometimes you go, well, now I'm mad that you didn't come, so now when you do come to me, now I'm mad, now that's a bad experience.
Right.
That's lack of consistency. In the beginning, you need to prioritize where you're going to put your efforts here. So if you want to go in the beginning, let's do a lot of pleasant experiences when you come to me. In the beginning, it needs to be a responsibility to be consistent that happens every time. And realize that maybe in the beginning, if your dog didn't come to you as fast as you wanted, your dog didn't come to you as the first time, maybe you were not prepared, maybe you didn't have a leash on your dog, maybe the distractions that you set for your dog were too much for that dog to bear, and it's only the beginning. Well, you should take that as that was a bad repetition that was on you, not on the dog. The dog doesn't know that.
So you just said something here, basically. All right, so you're frustrated, it's not coming, not following the recall command, and then when it does come, last thing you need to do is discipline it at that point, because there's no reason the dog would want to come back to you to be disciplined.
Because maybe the previous repetition you were like, great, good things happen. Look, I got this chicken. Then 3 repetitions later, you were like, why did you come back to me so late? You know what I mean?
Yes.
So that's lack of consistency right there. In the beginning, and I'm specifically saying in the beginning, I'm not talking about a proficient dog. I'm talking about a dog that is not proficient. You need to be consistent with good things happen every time. And if we have a bad repetition, it wasn't your fault. Because you don't know, you're not proficient in this. It was my fault. So if anything, I should be mad at myself.
You're teaching a vocabulary.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're gonna probably assume the vocabulary is very limited.
Oh yeah.
Right. Okay.
You're teaching the dog to do something so unnatural. What animal wants to come back to you when they're sniffing urine?
When they're doing their thing.
Yeah. So you have to. It's such a process that takes you as a person to go, I need to think a little bit, I need to be the bigger person, like people say, right? I have to realize, I know some things that you really don't have a clue, and so I'm going to put in the time to teach you this. So lack of consistency right there can affect the training and recall, because the dog will go, so I'm confused, is it good or is it bad to come back to you?
Right.
Another piece in which lack of consistency will be a problem is, if, let's say we're not dealing with a young, inexperienced dog, but let's say we're dealing with a dog that is learning, so their level of proficiency is a little bit higher. They're like, okay, I think I'm getting this. Well, what happens with lack of consistency is when people will go, come back, you have to come back, and they'll go, okay, yeah, I got to come back. And then another repetition, they call the dog, you have to come back. The dog goes, do I have to? And the person goes, I guess you don't have to. You know what I mean? Right. So then what happens is the owner is now going, sometimes you can blow me off and it's okay. Sometimes I mean it. Sometimes you don't have to. It's
So
like raising a child.
So the owner needs to be involved in this. The owner needs to be 100% involved in this recall, not halfway in a conversation with somebody else or messing with their phone and trying to do this.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you can see where it could be
Absolutely.
mixed signals going across.
My rule is, if you're gonna give a command, you have committed to that command as much as the dog is. So you're equally committed to that. If I say sit to a proficient dog, it is my commitment now to make sure that that butt hits the ground. If I call, so I don't waste my commands. I don't go, sit, 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 come, down, down. I don't do that. So I'll go, if I say it, I have to be careful, because once I say it, one, that means I really need you to do it, right? And once I say it, I have committed to it. Just like I expect you to commit to it as a dog, I'm also going to expect myself to commit to it if you decide you're not going to do it. Then I'm going to make sure that I take the proper steps to go, no, you have to come back. I'm going to make sure that your body ends right here in front of me as we're training.
Okay. You mentioned distractions. How can distractions be managed during recall training, especially in the outdoor or public setting?
As far as managing distraction goes, a long leash is your best friend. Long leash, when you're teaching, long leash is your best friend. As the dog gains proficiency, naturally we want to get away from that. But towards the beginning to intermediate phase of the training, long leash.
Makes sense. And I know you've talked about on some of your videos that you have on your YouTube, how you use people for distractions on purpose while you're training the dogs.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that you can control. So like, if let's say I have a very friendly dog, which I have one right now that I'm training, she'll come back to me every single time for anything, but if she sees a person, that's the time she doesn't want to come back. She's like, there's a person over there. So I'm still on the leash. Exactly. So, but that's the one distraction that for her, that to her, she explodes. She's like, there's a person. I have to go to the person.
I have to get more attention.
Yeah. Like, I'll have her out in the 5 acres. I'll have my ducks out. Doesn't care about the ducks. I'll have a dog out. She's like, yeah, I'll come back if there's a dog out. But if there is a person, just all she's like, I'm going to that person. So the people that I'm using, I can control those distractions. I can tell those people, don't pet her. Don't give her any attention. Just stand there. Let me do my thing. If I can't control the distractions, then it's a problem. You know, if I were to train in the public with this particular dog, if I were to train at a park and she saw a person and I was working with her, and the people went and rushed over and pet her and hugged her and loved on her, well, that's a distraction that I can't control. You know what I mean? Yes. I can tell them, do not pet my dog, but most of the time people out in the public are going to go, no, it's okay.
Used to be people would be like, can I pet your dog? Now
Right.
It's just like, oh, come here.
Everybody's so entitled now.
Yeah.
So same thing with dogs. Like when I train with dogs as distractions, you know, I use my dogs first because I control them. I can tell them down, and they won't move. They'll be on a down. And then I can work with the dogs. But if I train in a park and have a young, inexperienced dog, well, now I can't control those dogs. So now my dog's going to go to those dogs. Those dogs are going to engage my dog, and now I'm battling my dog, and I'm battling the other person's dog.
So going and taking your dog to the park to train is not something you do for your beginner dog to make you feel good. You'd probably be more in the intermediate stage.
Intermediate, yeah, intermediate to advanced. Once you're proofing the training a little bit more, then you can go into distractions that you can't control.
I could see that being just controlled chaos, taking a beginner dog to the park thinking, oh, look, I'm going to show everybody, and it just falls apart.
It falls apart. You're going to get a lot of judgmental looks and comments because people will tell you, it doesn't matter how you're training. You could be training with chicken and treats and clickers, and people will still tell you, you should let your dog say hi to people.
Everybody's got an opinion.
Everybody's an expert. out there, you know. So
or it's kind of like, hey, we are entering this season now, starting where we're gonna have a lot of Monday morning armchair quarterbacks.
oh, yeah,
coming up. So
yeah,
everybody's training on that.
yeah.
Okay, effective ways. Let's talk about what are some of the effective ways to make recall training fun and engaging for the owner and the dog.
Fun and engaging would be lots of treats.
Because the reason that you mentioned is very good. It's hours upon hours to get something proficient.
Hundreds of repetitions.
And
yeah.
But you also said when you give that command, you have to be as committed as that dog is committed.
Yes.
For the command.
Yeah.
But you got to make it fun.
In the beginning, yes. In the beginning, it has to be fun. In the beginning, we're operating under the assumption that the dog doesn't understand what a recall is. You know what I mean? The dog might have a rough idea of what it is, but maybe it doesn't 100%. So in the beginning, it has to be good things happen. Good things happen. What happens is when you keep it fun, the dog gets excited to come back. That's what we want. We don't want the dog to come back with its head down and go, all right, I'm here, you know, I'm doing my duty type of thing. We want to reserve that for maybe the duty thing needs to be a little bit later. In the beginning, it needs to be fun and exciting.
Mm-hmm.
So lots of treats, controlled environment, long leash for sure. That way, if my young, inexperienced dog gets distracted by something, I can control him. So that would be one way to keep it. And I need to be the most exciting thing in that environment,
okay,
which is why I'm going to control the environment. I'm not going to have 3 dogs out, and you know, and my cat and my dog saying, "Go, hey, look, I have this 3 pieces of kibble." Dog's going to be like, "I got dog, person. You're the least exciting person here."
Dog, human. Like,
yeah, exactly.
What about like tone of voice?
Oh yeah, tone of voice is good. To an extent.
Upbeat tone or disciplined tone?
I would say more neutral and maybe a little bit more excited.
Okay.
In the beginning for sure. I don't necessarily feel like you need to alter your voice. Like,
I do that.
you know, like,
Oh, yeah.
but your voice is more feminine, more high pitched.
But I get real, return.
Yeah, but it's fine.
All excited.
But if you get excited, your voice doesn't change a whole lot. But if I were to tell, Bill, sound just like your wife, he's gonna have to alter his vocal range. But a more excited version of you would be still you. You know what I mean? Like a more excited version of me is still me.
And you should hear the tone of our voices when we're potty training a dog and it goes outside and you're giving it all the praise in the world and it's like, God, I hope my neighbors can't hear it.
Yeah. Good potty. Or use little hand motions.
Yeah.
You're trying to give it praise for doing what you want it to do, where it.
And it's going pretty good.
Yeah,
it's going pretty
Coco's
good.
doing pretty good at that.
Yeah.
We've already talked about the rewards and treats and praise. Let's talk about what should be done if the dog consistently ignores recall commands. Do you just scratch it and start back over, or?
So if the dog consistently is ignoring the recall, again, there is some factors here to consider. Maybe you've done your hundreds of repetitions, maybe even thousands. You've done all the work. You've gotten your chicken. You controlled your environment, and you got your voice at the right pitch. You did everything perfect, and you did it for several hundreds, if not thousands of repetitions. And now you're going, why does the dog keep ignoring me? Well, now a couple of factors to consider. What kind of dog do you have? Is it a more independent dog? Do you have a dog that has had experience running off, taking off on you, or taking off on its previous owners? If that's the case, that means maybe you're not doing anything wrong. It just maybe means you need to put in a little bit of extra time. Maybe you need to change your approach a little bit more, or maybe you'll need help from somebody else who can help you with it. You know, a dog trainer, for instance, or or a combination of any of those things. You might have to go, a little bit of Googling, a little bit of YouTube. Maybe you can troubleshoot it yourself, but it might just be that your dog has had way too much experience taking off on people. And like I said, I can always see it. Every time I've seen a dog that I'm training, I'm like, this dog is taking a little bit too long with the recall. The owner, it's almost always the same thing. The owner tells me, wow, after the training is done, wow, I can't believe he's coming back. He used to run off and run away from me all the time. And I think to myself, I knew it. I'm like, I knew it because it was obvious that this dog had a reward history taken off, running around the neighborhood.
A reward history. Interesting.
So yeah, reward history just means, just like it sounds.
It makes sense.
Yeah, so if that's the case, if your dog is not coming back and it's consistently taking off on you, it might be that maybe you have that type of dog.
So, you've answered some of these already, Glenn. I won't make you re-answer them, but kind of just brush up on this one. It's important to practice the recall training, like in various environments and situations. So the environment could be, you got to the intermediate level, advanced level, going to the park, going out to more of an open area with some distractions, practicing. But what would be a situation that you try to practice it in besides? It would be having a lot of people, a lot of dogs, just a ton of distractions. Just
depends on your situation. Like my competition dogs, the ones I compete with, they're gonna see a tremendous unfair level of distractions. They're gonna be presented with things that they really want, that they've been trained to want their entire lives. And there's going to be a point in my sport that I do where the sport is going to show them those exact same distractions that they've learned to love for a majority of their lives, and I'm going to have to call them away from them before making contact. So in my instance, because I do a specific sport, yes, I have to train for a ridiculous amount of distractions. If you live in an urban area and you are very active with your dog, then the level of distraction you have to train your dog for are naturally going to be a little bit higher. More dogs, more people, more traffic. If your situation is you live in sort of a rural area, you don't really go out much. You don't really take your dogs for walks because you don't have to. You got plenty of space in your property.
Right.
The most you're probably going to see is deer, right? Wildlife here and there. Maybe then I would say to you, that's probably the most you need to train under.
Okay.
It really varies from situation to situation.
Yeah, I mean, a rabbit running across an armadillo or a deer versus going out to the major park.
And depending on the dog too, like there are dogs that are they're not human oriented. They don't even care about people. You could put a person going, "Hey, dog," right? And the dog would just go, "I don't care. So you don't really do it for me."
Probably not a good idea to take it to the park to practice recall when guys are out there playing frisbee with each other.
Right. Right.
I might learn how fetch plays into this.
Yeah.
What are signs that the recall training is progressing well, that it's time to leave the beginner stage and start?
Yeah. So some signs are when the dog starts to anticipate. The dog starts doing it with very little help. So you notice that the dog is showing a little bit of proactive behavior. You call them, they immediately run to you. That would be, to me, some signs that we're actually, he's doing it on his own most of the time. 8 out of 10 times is the rule. So
you would start cutting back on the reward?
Yeah, so the reward could now go on an intermittent basis. So instead of every single time, maybe I could reward him every other time. You know what I mean? So I'll reward you in this one, the next one I won't pay you, but the one after you'll get paid.
Because at the very beginning you mentioned, hey, I'm not getting rewards, so I'm not coming back.
Exactly.
So you need to start peeling it off.
Yeah, and some people, the one mistake that people make is they'll go, okay, he knows the recall, and then they just completely
stop.
They stop. It's like the payment entirely stops. What we want to do is want to let the dog know you're still getting paid on an intermittent basis.
So this is an odd deal. You've teaching the dog recall.
Mm-hmm.
It returns, but then just wants to immediately run off again.
Oh, that happens.
How would you address that, or is that two different issues?
No, it's the same. It's a recall, and it's not uncommon. The dog comes back, and it almost like they come back as a sense of duty. Yeah, I did the thing, and now I'm gonna go do my thing, right?
Well, he sounds like a teenager now.
That's exactly what they're like. They'll come back like, all right, I did my thing, I did it, all right, bye. I want to let the dog know, and I'll tell my clients know. I'll let my clients know. Call them again. This time, let them know. No. That's not what we meant. This is where it needs to be discipline. This is where the recall now has to switch into the thing that you love to do. Now you have to do it when you don't love to do it. You know what I mean? That's discipline. You have to do it as though you love how to do it. So first, you're going to love it. Then you're going to do it when you don't love to do it. And that's the way of life.
This is like teaching kids to take out the trash.
Just like that. Just like that. Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Just like that.
So, the next question here is on, okay, once the basic commands are established, are there advanced techniques for enhancing the recall reliability?
So, some techniques, I would say maybe not necessarily techniques. Maybe more of a, I guess the word mindset comes to mind, which you could have bad technique, or your technique doesn't have to be perfect. But if your mindset is you're coming back no matter what, that's the big switch that will make your recall reliable. The dog knows too. Mm-hmm. They know. They understand. Mom or dad, they're not screwing around. When they call me and I decide to not come back, because that happens, dogs, they do make those decisions. Even once they're fully proficient, they will still choose to say, no, I'm not coming back. So, but once you make a decision to go, you're doing it no matter what. Okay, even if I have to go, right? I have to go grab you and bring you back to me by hand. I have to physically grab you and bring you back to me. I'll do that. It'll take me 40 minutes. If it takes me 40 minutes to catch you, it takes me 40 minutes to catch you. Right? Once the dog realizes mom and dad, like, they're not giving up, you see they don't even gamble that anymore. They're like, all right, I'll come back.
Breaks the dog mentally.
Yeah, it's almost like you tell them, I am going to be more stubborn than you. Okay. Once the dog realizes that you're going to out-stubborn it, they'll go, all right, there's no use. I'll come back. I'll come back every time.
We've brushed on this one, but just to reiterate, because it's kind of, I can see the do-it-yourself dog trainer at home. Okay, so how can you handle a situation where the dog is distracted by other dogs or people during the training?
Mm-hmm.
Can you just give like a quick little bit of advice on how to handle that? Because
if a dog gets distracted during training by a dog,
by a dog or other people when you're trying to teach the recall here.
So in the beginning stages.
Yeah, you got to do it yourself.
Yeah.
Dog trainer at home. I'm going to do this. And the owner's committed. He's
absolutely. And that's great.
Be frustrating when you start working in the when you get people and other dogs.
Yeah. So the suggestion I would say is, if you can, use dogs and people that you can control. You have some control over. Best people to start with is your friends and your family, because you feel very comfortable telling them, do not touch my dog.
Give yourself a controlled environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Let the people know, I know you want to pet him, please don't pet him. I'm doing this, I want to work on it. If you're going to use dogs that belong to people that you feel comfortable with. Where you can go, hey, when your dog does, get a little bit excited to see my dog, just please grab your dog and just keep him from, from going after my dog in a playful manner or whatnot. So the more control, the better. If you don't have that and you have to sort of train with whatever you have, which is people and dogs you can't control, then long leash is your best friend. And also, when you do run into people, just have some boldness to be able and feel comfortable telling people that you don't know, do not pet my dog. Leave it alone.
It's almost you should get a vest and put on your little dog in working.
Yeah. They don't even work. People will still pet dogs. Yeah, people are so entitled.
We've seen that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's kind of go. You've talked about the long leash.
Mm-hmm.
What distance should we be trying to teach the recall? with this? I mean, 20 feet, 30 feet.
230 feet, 20 to 30 feet
Okay.
typically works. If you want to use, if you want to make the electronic collar part of your training protocol, that definitely is helpful because it allows you to get away from the leash much quicker.
Okay.
It allows you to use various distances because you're not limited by the length of a piece of line.
That does bring up a good point here. Is like you're when you're trying to teach the recall, start out 20, work your way up to 30 feet.
Yeah, 20 or 30 feet, and the only reason is it's just easier to handle a 20-foot line is easier to handle than a 30-foot line.
Got it.
You know what I mean?
All right. So when you're doing the recall training sessions, how long should they really last?
That's a really good question. Short sessions are typically great. You don't want to burn your dog out with like a 20-minute session, especially when they're young and inexperienced. They're young and inexperienced, you're going to make it so boring that it could possibly undo some of the excitability that you're trying to bring into the training. So I don't think of it as times. I think of it as repetitions. So when I do a session, I'll give myself, in this session, I'm going to do about 15 repetitions.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll do 20 repetitions. Sometimes I'll do 30 repetitions. So if I finish my 15 repetitions in a few minutes, where the dog is coming back, good, coming back, good, coming back, good, you're getting paid, you're getting paid. We complete those 15 repetitions in like a few minutes, we're done. I'm going to put you away. I'm going to let the dog, and here's the thing too that is interesting. So another really big, important point here. When you train for the recall, you're letting the dog know, I am more exciting than the environment I just gave you, right? When you train the recall after your training session, which, you know, again, it should be somewhat short, don't just unclip your dog and let him go outside, because you basically are undoing a little bit of what you just worked so hard to do. So the best thing to do is after you train that recall, put them either inside or put them in a crate. Let them digest it in their mind. It actually is a real thing. I've seen it so many times where you do a training session, you put them away, especially if you put them in a crate. One, they just mentally worked. So they're mentally, they've had some mental exercise during that training session. So when you put them away, they're not filling themselves up with dopamine and endorphins, and all these happy hormones from the environment, because it's a big contrast, right? Your training session, then you're giving them something much more exciting. The best thing to do is after you train, put them away for a little bit. Put them in the crate for about 50 minutes, 20 minutes. If you can do an hour, it's fine, not a big deal. And then in that time that they're going to be put away, they just got this big contrast of, I did a training session with my owner where coming back to him or her was great. And then I went into my crate to relax for a little bit, take a mental break from what I just did, very likely take a nap. And then that's when a lot of the learning just sets in. I've seen it happen so many times where I've seen it happen with me, with dogs that I've trained, and I've seen it happen with trainers that I've trained, where they're training their dogs, and they're going, we're not making a whole lot of progress. What's going on? I'll just go, just keep training, keep adding repetitions, and keep putting them away. What will happen is, it's not uncommon at all. If you train dogs often enough, you see this. One day you'll pull the dog out of the crate for a training session, and it's like somehow they figured it out. It's like they learned something while they were just sleeping, taking a nap. Because that's truly where the training sets in.